This video is going to describe how to properly connect the version 3 BMS and active balancer on the Seplos Mason 280 litre vertical DIY battery kit. This battery has recently been finished and programmed in the BMS studio. However, this video will only focus on the connections, as there's content lacking online and misleading content leading to improper connections and setups of the battery. So just to show you here, I'm going to power the battery on. And as you can see here, the pack voltage is 52.65. State of charge is at 32%, though that may be correct. The battery hasn't been cycled at all yet, and everything is working fine here. So we can check the individual cells. There we go. Okay, so before we go into anything, if the battery has been essentially assembled, you want to make sure that the power is turned off. You want to remove all of the machine screws from the case, so you can remove the top cover and also the front cover. I just have one machine screw just holding this in place for now, so I'm going to remove that and I'll show you how best to set up the cover so everything is accessible. Okay, so I've just removed the one machine screw here. Just very carefully, making sure not to strain any of the cables that are connected. Just turn this around here. Okay. Now all of the machine screws have been removed from not only the top, the rear, and the sides, the entire door. I've powered off the battery. It's still not completely safe. You don't want to touch any of the battery cells. What you will need, I won't adjust the camera here, but you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Anybody that has the battery, there's a YS8 buzz bar, which is connecting to the positive battery or negative battery terminal. So we're going to have to remove the bolt that's holding that to the cover, to the back terminal, and I'm also going to have to remove this YS4 connection to positive cell 16. That will allow me to lift the cover somewhat, and then I'll also have to remove this cable here, which belongs to the A section balancer. I'll have to just remove that from here, and it'll allow me to open up the whole cover. So you'll see what I'm talking about in just a moment. First thing I'll do, I'll get my extensions, and I'm going to use a number 13. So this is a 13mm socket, and I'm just going to open this now. Now, it might be a good idea to insulate your tools just to be safe. My tools are not insulated, but suffice to say that I work in calibrations all day long, and I'm quite comfortable not using insulation on this. So I'll be very careful so as not to cause any damage. Okay, so just remove this bolt here. Next, I'll just use the small extension just to give me a little bit of distance, and I'll loosen positive cell 16 and secure the buzz bar while I'm doing that. There we go. Okay, now that that's removed, I can take away this connection here, which connects to the active balancer. That's what powers the balancer. And I'm removing this, which is your B negative, and then also the voltage reader here as well. And finally, just removing YS4. So YS4 and YS8 are now removed. I'll change the camera angle. No, I won't actually. I'll just remove it here. Again, you'll know exactly what you need to take out if you have this case. So just being careful to get in, have to put pressure on the tab. Might have more luck with my left hand, yeah. And there we go. So that's the balancing cable. That's now removed. I'll just leave that aside. And the simplest way of doing this, if you don't want to remove these cables, that's fine. I'd recommend you do, unless you're very careful. When you're moving anything about, you could pull on the cables, you could damage it, you could knock over the door, it could damage the door, it could rip the cables out, it could damage the boards. So just be very mindful of these cables when you're making any movements at all. So what I find is the simplest way of doing this, lift it up nice and gentle, and you'll see we kind of have a little gap here at the back. So at the highest point at the back, you just have two little slots here. And what you can do is just slot that back section down. And you can lean that up against the wall. And that's nice and secure there. That's not going anywhere. Okay, so now that everything is accessible, we can see the balancer, we can see the communications PCB, and we can see the BMS. So I'm just going to bring the camera over and run you through the connections so you can see where everything needs to go. Okay, so now that we're looking at the units here, we have the active balancer, we have the communications board, and we have the battery management system, or BMS. So I'm going to start from the active balancer. So we'll work our way from top to bottom insofar as is possible. There is going to be a little bit of overlapping here, but this is just to give you a clear idea of where to make the correct connections. And as you can see here, this first seat, this is the one that I disconnected right here in order to allow me to lift the cover out of the way. So we have YS4 and YS8. Once those are disconnected, we can lift the cover up just a couple of inches to allow us easier access to be able to disconnect that particular cable. So going back to the active balancer, you have, as you can see, 1 to 8 here. That's the one we removed. And then we have 9 to 16. So 9 to 16 is a slightly longer loom, and that one goes to the B PCB. So you have your long A PCB and you have your B PCB. And your A and your B, this is what connects all your little connections here to the positive and negatives of all of your batteries, or all of your cells, I should say. Sticking with the active balancer, the cables, this cable that are removed, you can run those over the PCBs, but what I did was I removed the PCBs and I ran everything below, and by doing that I was able to remove all of the little wires, or rather just run them under here and just make it a nice neat job. So all of these are your balancing cables, they're all run below here. They are held in place with these little cable tie mounts and are cable tied to those mounts. And I have a mount basically underneath every solid piece here. So I have 6 or 7 of those mounts, and the wires are running through, keeping everything nice and neat. So looking at these wires, they are all labeled. So as you can see here, we have B1. And then if we go down here to cell 2, we have B2. And they're all connected to the positives. B3, B4, B5, B6, B7, B8. And then we go across to 9 and up to 10 and 11, and all of them connected to positive with the exception of 2. So the first exception is on cell number 1. You'll see here we have B1 negative. So it goes to the negative contact on the first cell. And the next one is all the way down here. We have B9 negative, and that goes to the negative contact on cell number 9. And you see here we have B9 positive. Okay. What you'll notice is that the PCBs obviously have all their own connections going to every one of the positive and negatives. Just important to connect them. You'll see wherever there is a connection, you can't really get it anywhere else. So this little voltage connection, you wouldn't be able to run it down here. You wouldn't be able to run it over there. You can't really mess these guys up. So once you put your cells in the correct orientation, you can't mess these guys up. Just run it to the nearest terminal and bolt those on. Nice and simple. You also have your temperature. Let me see, right here, this one here. So these read the temperature. You just connect these up again to the nearest terminal and you won't make any mistakes. Now, you could stretch it up here, but it's closer to this cell, and that's where the instructions say to connect it anyway. Just to see here, if you're looking at A, you're going to connect the first one to cell 2 negative. The next one you're going to connect to cell 7 negative, cell 10 negative, and then the next one you're going to connect is going to be cell 15 negative. So hopefully that helps you out. Back up to the active balancer. So we've covered the looms that connect the balancing to the cells directly. And the next one we want to look at, you'll see it's almost in the middle of the board. So I'm working from right to left, and I'm going to focus on cable colors to make this easy. So the first one here, we have red, yellow, white, and black. If we follow this cable, here we go. Red, yellow, white, and black. It's just reversed here because the way it seats in. So you're going to run that down to the BMS, top right-hand corner, and it's the second one in from the right-hand side. That's where that connects. It actually connects, can't really see here, but on the top right, it says dry. There we go. It says dry. That's where you want to connect that one in. The next one is going to be a red, black, red, black. That red, black, well, that connects directly to your balance button. So that's a nice, easy one. The button is already connected. It usually has its cables just kind of hanging out. If you've purchased from Fogstar, the button is already connected. You don't need to install that. The next one across, as you can see, we have a black and a red cable. So just 2 wires here. And these guys, we follow them down, they run directly to the battery. So cell 1 and cell 16. So the black one runs to the negative on cell 1, and the red one, that will connect to the positive on cell 16. So let's move on. If we work our way down, we'll see the rocker switch here, just above the communication board, and that will run down and that'll be on the BMS. It's the third one in from the right, and just 2 wires there. So we have your black and your red, and I'm not sure if you can see if we can zoom in there. It will say power switch there, or on switch, on SW. Moving back up. So we're just back up to the comms board here. And we'll just ignore those two for now. We'll move across here to the right. And we're looking at the orange and red cable. So it's a 4-pin, but we only have two of the cables or two of the wires connected. And if we run down, follow these wires down, they will connect down to the PCB or the BMS. And you can see that they run down here. Sorry, these wires are just in the way. They will run down to this 9-seat connection. So you'll have the 2 wires running in here, and then the additional 7 wires, they'll run from that connection. They'll run all the way around, and you'll connect those onto the LED connector. So looking at the comms board again, if we look at the center seat, we check out the cables, and we're looking at black, yellow, white, black, red. And following these guys all the way down, and that's connected to this seat. So this is actually a nice, easy way of doing this. If you look at it, we have a seat here, the one that we were last looking at. So it's the next one in. So we have, we call this number 1, we'll go into number 2 and number 3, but just focusing on these two here, you have your left and you have your right. If you go back up to the communications board, left connects to left and right connects to right. That's how those connections go in. So that's now your comms board out of the way. Everything is connected. If we come down and have a look at the BMS, we look at your main wiring looms here. You have your black and you have your white here. So the white one is actually the long one, and that runs right across here, and that connects into your B PCB. Your black one is the short one right here that runs, and that goes into your A PCB to read all the voltages on all of the cells. The one here on the right hand side, which is your red, white, yellow and black. So just zoom in on that there for a second. And if we follow that cable, well, that actually connects into your LCD. So we've covered all of the seat connections here on the BMS. We've covered all of the connections here on your comms board, and we've covered all of the connections on your active balancer. The one that's easily missed is a wire that comes separately, or a little cable that comes separately, and that's your B plus right here at the back of your version 3 BMS. This B plus cable, I've run it under the BMS, or rather under the shelf, and this is it here. It's a slightly thicker gauge than the rest of the cables. That connects to the positive terminal on cell 16. So you will have 3 connections plus the bus bar connecting to the positive on cell 16, and you'll also have 3 connections connecting to the negative terminal on cell number 1. So you'll have your voltage check, you'll have your battery plus in this case, and you'll have that power connection that runs back up to your active balancer. Now it's important at this stage of the video to point out that there are actually 4 connections to the positive terminal on cell number 16. At other stages of the video, you might have noticed that there were only 3 connections. This is because B16 balancing wire was actually connected to the negative terminal on cell 15. This wasn't noticed until after the battery build was complete and connected to the inverter, at which point I noticed that balancing of the cells wasn't completing. The balancer was switching off after about a minute. And I also noticed, as you can see up here in the right hand side of the screen, cell 16 was approximately 100 millivolts out of balance with the rest of the pack on average. So this was corrected and I was then able to balance the cells. So you'll put your buzz bar on, and then you'll run these connections on, and then you'll bolt it back into place. Okay, so I have the front cover back on. I've just put one machine screw in place here just to make sure it doesn't fall off. I will put another one in the bottom here. So I suppose I should turn the unit on and see if everything is still working. Okay, that's good. So the LED lights lit up there, just did its run, tested all the lights, and it's just flashing green, so I don't have any alarms. And we have pack voltage, current, state of charge, and warnings. So I'll just have a quick look here and just let's check the warnings, I suppose. Capacity, this is what I want to look at. So you will have to configure a few, well, you don't have to, it is plug and play, but you will want to make a few changes in the BMS Studio. I might cover that in another video. The state of charge, or rather the battery capacity, I should say, was automatically set at 290 amp hours. So I did have to adjust that in two areas to 305 amp hours, which is the capacity of the cells that I have in here. So it will have to learn the state of charge. It's showing up as 30%, but that may not be the case at all, as it hasn't cycled at all, at 32% here, as you can see. Now, when I did wire this up the first couple of times, it wasn't correct. The cables, the wires, they can go into a few different areas. So my first attempt, what I found was at the back here, the balance switch light wasn't on. Now this is a momentary switch. When you press it, it should activate and it should light up. So I took it apart again and I moved the wire or the cable to another spot, and I turned it on, reconnected everything up, and the light remained on, but that didn't work. So I did get that incorrect information from watching other videos. So I decided to just follow the logic, see where everything connected. I looked at a Seplos video and seen a couple of the cables where they should be connected on the active balancer, and then followed on from there, and I made the correct connections, which is what I've showed you in this video. So what should happen is when the battery is on, or actually, let's see, maybe even when it's off, you see that powering down. There we are, so the battery is now off. I haven't tested this yet, let's see. Okay, so even when the battery is off, you can hear there, the active balancer is just turned on. That will stay on for a minute or so because the batteries aren't charged. There's obviously, or they're not charging, there's no need to balance them. So they'll only balance at the upper end, which is again something that you'll want to change in the BMS Studio. There's much more detailed videos on that on the electrified garage. So I'm just going to turn that off there. So it looks like everything is connected properly. If I find that any mistakes have been made, which I don't believe I have, because I've checked all of the settings on the BMS Studio, everything seems to be responding as it's supposed to. Obviously, I can't do a full test until I've connected this to the inverter, but if there are any changes, I'll edit this video accordingly, so you have the most up-to-date information for the version 3 BMS, Seplos BMS with the active balancer. So once again, guys, I hope this has been useful. Thank you for watching.